I've been introduced. My name is Debbie Hendricks. I'm an urban planner by profession, but I'm currently employed with the Mandela Bay Development Agency. We are based in Port Elizabeth, now known as Gqeberha, situated in the southeast coast of South Africa. Our agency is a special purpose vehicle that's been established by the local municipality to implement projects on their behalf. We've been around since about 2013, and historically the agency was set up to bring about urban renewal in the inner city, specifically focus on the urban heart of the city. And with time, that mandate has been expanded to other areas in the city, mainly township areas, areas where development is also required across the city. So historically, the MBDA's mandate around urban renewal obviously focused on the inner city in terms of area-based management, that's security, cleansing, waste management, etc. But we also do a number of catalytic projects. Those are projects that are seen as game changers, not just for the city but also the region, that's got the potential for major economic impact. We're also involved in various multi-sector development interventions. That is clustering or crowding in a combination of infrastructure projects, psychosocial projects, arts and culture projects. Those are in mandated, specific demarcated mandated areas that we do. We also do facilities management of a number of facilities that we look after and maintain and we operate. Another leg of what we do is partnerships. We are concluding partnerships with various entities and partners in the business space, governments, non-NGOs, NPOs, business, research and learning institutes. And over time, we've also noted that the focus on infrastructure, the feedback from the community is that doesn't necessarily translate to development. We have to do it in combination with developing the community themselves. People need to feel part of what's happening. They need to feel part of the development that's happening. You have to take them along. There's no point in building a facility and there's a dissociation with that community and that facility. So the idea of co-production is essentially that. It's a meeting of minds, but in our space, it really is about bringing in communities as legitimate partners in all stages of project implementation and the project life cycle. So that is planning. And when I talk about planning, I'm talking about the urban planning processes, as well as the conceptual and the development planning, the initial stages of a project plan. The other one is implementation. In our space, that could be construction or the actual rollout of the project. Then operations and maintenance, as well as monitoring and evaluation. So just on town planning, I just want to say quickly that traditionally, town planning, the focus seemed to be a lot more on planning control as opposed to strategic and development planning. In other words, the legislation, some of them which are quite outdated. I mean, I'm aware that local zoning schemes have been passed in 1987. That is, 10 years before Mandela came out of prison. That legislation is outdated. I mean, SPLUMA also allows local authorities to craft and pass their own local bylaws and regulations. So there's no reason why we should be hanging on to old legislation. As you know, South Africa has got some of the best legislation in the world. But in this space, sometimes we could be seen as being over-legislated and over-planned. A recent review by National Treasury actually, indicates that the city is done very well and we're very, well covered as far as planning is concerned. But where we fall short is on implementation. And one of the things that we really see as a weakness is the gaps and the weaknesses in public and community engagement. Not just the tick box exercise that we do with the IDP, but real meaningful community engagement where the community can really contribute to their own development. This we often find is not realized in development space. As far as project planning is concerned, you have to understand all the stakeholders in the space. You can do a bit of a stakeholder analysis or mind map of stakeholders, so that you understand that the municipality or the producer of services or the deliverer of services is just one of the stakeholders. There are other partners that often don't play the role that they really should be playing. Communities cannot just be seen as consumers or mere beneficiaries of development, but really the time has come that they are seen as full partners, not just as token partners on a process. That requires a bit of a mind shift from them being recipients of facilities or services towards stewardship and ownership. This notion of co-production or real partnerships, this takes time to build. It's an investment in terms of effort, in funds. It might extend your project quite a bit, but it's an important stage. It would save you trouble later on in the project and it actually sets you up for better delivery and better outcomes later in the project. It's often overlooked by project planners as well as funders, because it really implies a concerted effort around building capacity, building relationships, and building trust with the communities that we have to work with. I use an example of Singapi Street. Singapi Street is a prominent road in a township area called New Brighton, where we've done a substantial upgrade to that road, but it's really based on community input, where we had community together with the children and the women and the various groupings come together, with cookies and paints and crayons, etc., to design, the parks and the facilities down that street, up to choosing colors for the paint. And so you can imagine the excitement of children that they've been part of something in terms of its design and delivery, and now it's their legacy. They own the space, they identify it, they were there from the start. That seems to yield results with regards to how community looks after the facility or after the infrastructure that's been put there, because it's really their work. The other one is obviously implementation. I spoke earlier about not just benefiting or participating during the planning phase, but also on the implementation phase. So when a project, for instance, a construction project, what does the community bring in terms of their contribution? So their labor, their skills, if that is built into the design of the project, it actually delivers a sense of pride for them, achievement. There's a legacy for families and community. Also a sense of we can do it ourselves versus government must provide for us. We have this thing of focusing on the SMMEs. The SMME phenomenon is really quite a talking point in the country at the moment, where SMME is obviously demanding, in our case, in terms of the procurement policy, 30% of the project value must go to an SMME. That's become such a huge focus point that then often community stakeholders step back and the SMME discussion, takes up the focus, but, we forget about the actual value of the facility. Is the school or the park or the road or whatever, that is actually delivered? That's the real long-term value and the long-term benefit to that community, not just the few temporary jobs that are created during construction. Then, lastly, in terms of implementation, the current procurement policies and supply chain processes makes it almost impossible for us or for government to do business with community structures. When I say business, I mean not business in the normal sense of the word, but it's impossible to contract with community groupings to, that in ways that would benefit a project and also would benefit that particular community. Currently, it's required that a registered business must tender, etc. Some of the community groupings are not businesses, but why can't a person or a group of people be paid to cut their own grass in their community? Why must we get a service provider from outside to come and cut the grass? If you go there now, the grass is not being cut because that community does not want an outsider to come and cut the grass. So then nothing happens because there's no way of actually contracting that community group to cut their own grass. Why? We have to ask ourselves, so we get an outside contractor in, he gets robbed of his equipment, he gets chased out of the area, etc. The community is very angry. They are also unemployed, they are also hungry. And this is their space. Why must another company be contracted and paid, but we cannot find a way for a couple of young men, with lawnmowers to cut a park in the area? That's what I'm saying. Supply chain processes doesn't favor that. Also, it doesn't favor the unbundling of projects. Procurement legislation, the ones that we currently have, states that it's got to be one contract. So in the case of Singapi, we really wanted to unbundle it, and by that I mean is a small business to plant the grass for the park, another one to provide the fencing, another one to do the painting, etc. So that small business can actively participate, and it's not just open for big business. That is community getting engaged, but also meaningfully benefiting and developing as part of the project. You can actually, walk away there with some experience on your CV. You can walk away there some with training or some accreditation that you've gained, etc. So the project design has to take that into account as well. The other thing is I wanted to just make an example of the Helenvale sports field where, whilst the city is undergoing a terrible scourge where all the community facilities, caretakers' cottages at sports fields, ablution facilities, stadiums, whatever, swimming pools, these things have just been vandalized and they've been carried away brick by brick. And we have to ask ourselves, but why does that happen in communities? Why are people standing around and watching that happen? And there seems to be, I keep on saying this word, but a real disconnect between the communities and some of the facilities and the services that are being rendered. Another example is some of our areas are incredibly dirty, so we don't understand why people would dump right in front of their own house. And our areas are filthy, and it's not hygienic, it's not safe for our children, etc. And you have to ask yourself, but how does that happen? And in one of the engagements with the community, somebody said, people don't care. There's a sense of government does not care for us. Why must we care? Nobody cares about the next person. And there seems to be we seem to be in a collective depression where you don't realize anymore how dirty it is around you. We have to start looking at creating a culture of caring in our communities, caring about environment, caring about your neighbor, caring about your neighbor's children. We don't have to have a police station or security guard on every street corner, on every public space. The example in Helenvale is exactly that, where local communities, have actually claimed ownership or stewardship, if you like, of that facility. There's no formal security. They watch that facility themselves. The caretaker is from Helenvale. They cut the grass themselves, etc. So nobody, in the last year that the facility has been used by the community, there's been no incidents of vandalism, and the facility is spotless. So it shows that in the same city where the next sports field is completely vandalized, we have to ask ourselves, what is the common denominator where there are problems, and why can it actually work in a different scenario like we've proven in Helenville. I'm not going to speak a lot about maintenance and operations, but the same level of engagement that we have with communities around planning is communities should also be brought into discussions around maintenance and operations, and even the participatory budgeting processes for projects. It's easier to get funding for big capital projects. It is much easier to get funding for big capital projects than it is for maintenance and operations. It's something that we have to engage in with our funders, with our local municipalities, with National Treasury, etc., because the municipality struggles with this thing. But everybody wants to see capital projects. We are actually now saying we shouldn't be doing more capital projects unless there is commitment, long-term commitment for maintenance and operational budget to look after these facilities. The community can be engaged in actually providing that they be in their own communities, look after their facilities, that we engage women and youth around offering some of those services, etc. So that's all I can say about monitoring evaluation. I have this thing of, but the real success of a project is not did you reach your target, is that the community benefit. Does it change their lives? Does it translate to development for them? It would be interesting if communities were actually have an input into the performance of politicians and officials. That there must be systems where you engage them at IDP, but you must also engage them when you measure the performance of the official or the politician around these things. I think the picture would be very different if that is actually a reality. But it's something to, as the ultimate measuring tool, it needs to be really looked at. The current ones, paints a very bright picture, but reality is it's not translating to development in real time on the ground. So what do communities bring to the table? Local knowledge and local insights that technocrats and outsiders might not have. This makes for better planning, better outcomes. You could have real local solutions for local problems. Them taking ownership of a particular area, particular project. You could really develop a sense of caring for something, caring for the facility. They are invested in the processes, and also they would be then connected to an area where you would have very likely to have better security and improved surveillance. Also a greater balance in terms of areas of responsibility and carrying the burden for the city. It's not just for government to deliver. Every sector of society, include communities, have a responsibility. Obviously their labor and their sweat equity in terms of the skills that they bring. South Africa has got one of the highest unemployment rates in the world. It's time that we put our communities to work. And a lot of the work that government does, we can actually engage community, not just to improve our economy, but to improve livelihoods of our people in our towns, in our cities. So that's just a few thoughts that I have based on the work that we do and the lessons that we've learned. Thank you for taking the time to listen to me this morning.